Ready? Yeah, go ahead.
So, so how long have you been writing poetry?
I've been writing poetry for about 18 years now. So how long have you been writing poetry? I've been writing poetry for 18 years. When speaking, not writing poetry, do you find yourself deliberating over word choice? Can you remember an example? Why did you do it? What effect were you trying to achieve? Um, I do find myself deliberating over word choice. I don't know if I could remember a specific example, but I'm a teacher, and so being both a poet and a teacher, I'm very aware of um, the way that language needs to be very precise and specific to get your point across. So I'm always trying to choose my words carefully in order to communicate the best way that I can, whether it's in a poem where the language is often much more heightened and distilled than in regular speech, or just like an everyday conversation. Uh, right now, I'm choosing my words carefully because this is a very important and I want to communicate well with you. Um, when speaking, do you ever attempt to use alliteration? If so, for what purpose do you do so? Um, I would not say that I consciously attempt to use alliteration. It's not a conscious thing, and I think that this is where I think using language both as a poet and just as a teacher or as a person, there are certain things that are absorbed. They're unconscious in me. So when I'm writing poetry, I'll often use alliteration, but I don't even think about it. It just kind of comes. And so I think that I do use alliteration in speech, but it's not something that I deliberately think about or try to do. And I think that we use alliteration in speech, and I would say this is true for a lot of people. I'm not sure if it's just me, but it feels like we use alliteration often to emphasize something, to catch our listeners' attention or our readers' attention, and that it provides a specific emphasis on something that we're trying to say. Um, when speaking, are you aware of rhythm or meter? Do you ever try to manipulate the rhythm of your speech? I am not aware of rhythm or a meter when I'm speaking. I'm not that smart to be aware of meter as I speak. I'm sure I'm subconsciously thinking about rhythm in some ways, um, but I don't know if I consciously think about it. I think much more specifically about rhythm when I'm writing on the page than I do when I speak. When I speak, I think I'm thinking much more about cadence, and cadence, I think, for me, is different than rhythm. Cadence is um, emphasis and pitch in the way that we say something. Rhythm to me is much more syntactical and tied up in the music of words and the syntax of a sentence. And I do a lot more of that when I'm writing poetry than I do when I'm speaking. That's the last question. Do you want to follow up with anything, or did you get what you needed, you think?
I wish to ask you if you wanted to say something, add something to it.
Um, I can't think of anything off the top of my head. If you want, do you want to tell me a little bit more about your project and what you're working on?
Yes. So we're doing a sociolinguistic project for a to analyze forms of speech.
Mm-hmm.
And for my project, I chose UC Denver poets.
And in thinking specifically about the way that poets use speech.
Yes.
Um, well, I think these are good questions. I think one of the things that I think that there is a misconception sometimes that poets speak very much differently than other people. That I've had people ask me, do you often, because I'm married to a poet as well, Nikki Beer,
I know her.
and I've had sometimes people ask us if we talk in rhyme at home. And I don't think that that's true, but I do think that we play around with metaphor a lot in our speech.
How so?
I think just in trying to express things, it's hard to give an example, but punning and play with language. I think that this is the thing that sometimes people don't realize about poets is that we're very interested in playing with language. Like we're serious, but when you write poetry, there's a kind of play. There's something very playful about it, and I think that when I speak as a poet with my wife, who's also a poet, we oftentimes will pun or create metaphors. And so there's that kind of playfulness of being a poet that I think comes in to our private speech, which is much different than I think public speech. And when I'm speaking as a teacher, that might not come in quite as much, even though I do it sometimes to crack a joke.
If you're speaking together outside in public, do you speak differently than you would at home?
I think so, but I'm guessing, my guess would be that that's true for a lot of people, not just poets. I think that we have different speech in different parts of our lives, and we speak and act differently in a professional situation or in public than we do in our house in private with people that we were very familiar with and that who know us, things like that. Wouldn't you? Do you think so?
I'm not in a relationship to a poet.
Well, I'm just thinking, just in terms of like, do you, in general, do you feel like you speak differently in class than you do with your friends or with your family?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Brian.
Yeah, definitely so.